Good afternoon. I'm just, if we start now, then we can finish sooner, right? Yes? I'm Michelle Daniel, and I'm the room monitor with Monique Cobb. Where'd Monique go? She's over there on the side there. If you're a nurse and need an evaluation form, let us know. We want to make sure that you get those. Okay? And let's see. Everyone getting CEs will have that code at the end of the session, so you stay tuned. All right, our presenters today are Walter Coffey and David Sprowl. This session is intensive session INT 2D as in Delta. The title of this session is Rising Up to Retain Your Staff, a Call to Action for Leaders. So let's all give a warm Atlanta welcome to Walter Coffey and David Sprowl.
Thank you. Okay. Are we ready to go? Okay, can everybody hear all right? Okay. Can you hear us now? 1, 2, 3. Can you hear us now? All right, we're ready to go. Okay. This is a little weird because some of you are a long way away, and we know that you're there. So if you can't hear or something, you may have to shout out because we can't see you too well. It's all right. So today, what we know in our field is that we're going to need a lot of talent. And so we're going to talk about several things today, is the pathways to retention and how do we retain our staff. And we're just going to share with you what we've been observing and learning ourselves. So if we were to do this next year, it might be different. So this is where we are right now. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're learning. And we've both been providers. And so our goal is to help organizations move forward in making sure that staff are developed so that organizations can retain their staff. So the first part we're going to go through is just some basic information and trends, things that you may know, you may have heard before, but at least it puts it out on the table. And then we've developed this coaching and mentoring model that we think is really going to be successful, and we're just starting to roll it out last year in conversations on helping support folks. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence, coaching, supervision, and person-centered organizations. So we're going to kind of dig deep in a couple of different things, and it may seem weird to you. It may seem like we're giving information about a particular topic, but at some point, it's going to all come together and make sense. So, and that's our goal. So ask us about Cameroon. We're working with an NGO in Cameroon, and that's us in January. So we want you to ask us about that. So when we're thinking about a pathway, what is a pathway in order to figure out what our journey is in our organizations? And I just actually looked this up this morning, and I was looking at the definition of a pathway is a way of receiving a specific result, a course of action, and a route. So one of the first things we're noticing with organizations, and as the CEO of Leading Age Georgia for the last 18 years, I've noticed a lot of our member organizations that have no pathway. They budget education and professional development money, and people go to a workshop, but then they come back, and most of the time they do what they were doing before. And we all know our field is very challenging. There's a lot that's happening every day. A lot of us that we never get to plan A. We're working on plan B, C, D, E, right? Especially if we're supporting individuals that have dementia sometime. They're experiencing the world in a different way. And so what we think we're going to do, oftentimes we don't really do. So what we heard this morning just really stuck with us is that we have to do the hard work for deep and sustainable change. And it's just like the culture change movement, right? It's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time program that you do, so it's an ongoing process. So that's going to set the stage. So what we know globally, we have international in our title, so we thought we should have a global slide, is that global conversation is about attracting and retaining the top talent and developing generations of leaders. And that's the biggest conversation that's going on globally with CEOs. And so what that does is set the stage for the need for change and for human capital to be a focus of organizations that want to have high performance and a lot of growth opportunities. But right here in the United States, one of our partners in the field of aging, Tad Melton, that works for Ziegler Capital Markets Group, he's been saying that over the last year that we really have an epidemic in this country tied to staffing and talent. And they pulled together the biggest retirement communities, 100 of the biggest retirement communities in the United States, and do a deep dive. A lot of it's very financially focused. And what they learned last year, and they're talking about it a lot this year, is that everybody, the top challenge that everybody's having in their organizations is finding the quality staff that they need and being able to retain them. And so they're spending a lot more money in their budget, even though a lot of these retirement communities have big marketing budgets where they're marketing to consumers. They're starting to use a lot of those funds to market to staff, to get staff to work in their organizations. And they're also using the money to fill staff positions where they can't find staff, and often in rural parts of the United States. So this is a really big conversation. A lot of times when we hear this, we always go right to the nurses. Well, there's a nurse shortage. We don't have enough nurses, and we all know that's true, and it is true. But what they're saying is that these are staffing challenges everywhere, all across the board: housekeeping, dining services, programmatic stuff. So we know that there's a big challenge. So we're hearing it globally, we're hearing it in the United States. So I'm gonna advance. There it goes. These slides just kind of are going to get us on an equal playing field, an even playing field. And the idea that we know that we have a lot more older people. We know that the population is growing. We know that there's a lot of new models of care. And what we hope is that there's a lot of more person-centered, person-directed programs and people that buy into everything that's going on, like what we're experiencing here is what we all want. And so that's creating a lot of different types of jobs. So we know when you're flattening the hierarchy of organizations and you're changing decision making, then a lot of times people from different departments work together in different ways. So that's creating a lot of different kinds of jobs. And we also know that aging services is a driver in a lot of communities, especially rural towns. And the quality conversation is moving towards quality workforce. So how do we make sure that we have the individuals that we really need in place? Now these next few slides were borrowed, not stolen. Even though we do believe in stealing, it's called the CASE method, copy and steal everything, right? C-A-S-E, if you're taking notes. Oh shoot, this is recorded. Oh well, okay, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah. So anyway, Dr. Robin Stone, a lot of you know if you're members of your leading age affiliates in different states, is the executive director of the Center for Applied Research. She's had almost every job that you can have at a really high level. A researcher's talked a lot about staffing. And so these next slides are slides that we've been having conversations with at a national level that Robin Stone is leaving these next few slides. We know that there's an emerging care gap. We know that there's a shift from institutional to in-home community-based services. And we just found out last month that for the first time in the history of Medicaid, Medicare, that more Medicaid dollars were spent on home and community-based services than in congregate settings. So we can actually see that shift in Medicaid dollars keeping people in the community. We know that we're more ethnically diverse, and we know that people have more education than what we've ever seen before. We know that there's a bigger disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and we know that there's a lot of consumer-directed systems that are out there. So consumers are really moving forward and looking at what they want, how they want it, and what it's going to look like. And then the impact of new technologies. I think a lot of us are really not aware of what's going on. Right here in Atlanta, we have at Georgia Tech, we have Tools for Life and Assistive Technology Center that's really focused on individuals living with different abilities for years. But now they're starting to partner with the aging services field. And there's all these technologies that have been there. Some of them are apps, some of them are very inexpensive. Some of the ones that are expensive, they have grant funds in order to help individuals get connected with technologies that they could use to help them remain independent and have a better quality of life. So these new technologies are really changing. And Brian LeBlanc, he's here. He's been working at the registration desk. I don't see Brian. I was going to call him out. He's an individual living with Alzheimer's disease, and he lives by himself in an apartment. So he's been coming back and forth to Atlanta doing a lot of things. And Alexa the technology is totally what keeps him on track. He wouldn't remember to take his medicine, when to sleep, if he ate. He wouldn't remember anything unless the technology was reminding him. And then if he didn't do it or respond, would keep reminding him. So he's living at home independently, but totally supported by technology. And we're going to see a lot more of that being developed. So when you look at challenges in the workforce development, these are things that we all know. And we also know, because of the lack of quality staff, the whole warm body thing is going away. So we used to just say, just hire somebody, we have to have minimum staff, right? And you probably, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there were a lot of organizations that were doing that. One of the things that Robin Stone asks us to say every time we get a chance is that she really feels that our field is undervalued, that society doesn't appreciate and understand and value aging services. So she feels like that it's a really bigger conversation than maybe what we're having on a small level. That we have a responsibility to not only create awareness, but tell the story of what we do and how we do it and what it looks like. So we also know that ageism leads to a lack of attention and investment. And in the Eden Associate Training, we spend a lot of time talking how ageism, looking at loneliness, helplessness, and boredom really pushes elders to be more isolated and be disconnected from society because so many times they aren't valued or they're in the way. And so it's just a whole different conversation. One of the interesting things, just 2 weeks ago at the Southern Gerontological Society Conference, we heard Dr. Philip Taylor from Australia, and he was talking about ageism is throughout life. And a lot of times we think ageism is just for older people, but he would challenge us to think bigger, that everybody is experiencing ageism depending on how old they are. And it makes me think of the millennials because we just last year at Leading Age Georgia had a task group of millennials that we decided to call young professionals because they didn't want to be stereotyped as millennials because we all say they do this, they don't do that. And what we learned is where we all think millennials love technology, the stats show that only 38% really are into technology and love it. And where we say millennials really aren't invested in their jobs, like in single digit numbers, they feel like they're really invested in their work. So we have this ageism thing going throughout our whole span. So when we're looking at the policy level, we know that there's inadequate reimbursement. We spend all of our time trying to get reimbursement rates increased. And in Georgia, the Medicaid reimbursement for adult day programs in our state hadn't been increased since 1999. And so 2 years ago, we started developing legislation for a study committee so that we could get the evidence that we needed so that they would have to put increases in the budget. So the suggestion was a 15% increase, 5% a year. And so we're 2 increases through that. So we've already gotten 10%. But we know how hard it is. We know long-term services and supports. All that financing piece is a real challenge, and what does it look like? Medicaid is viewed as a welfare program. We have members of Congress that just cannot understand this. They think everybody on Medicaid is lazy and could get a job. This is many of our policymakers in DC. Time after time, we're having these conversations with them. And then when we say, well, if a person's 85, 88, 92, and maybe they have a chronic illness, maybe they're living with dementia and something's going on in their lives, do you expect them to have a job? I mean, can they pay for their living expenses? Well, no, maybe, but then their family should take care of them. So they always jump to, they think that all older people are happy grandmothers sitting in front of the fireplace knitting and welcoming everybody home. And so we have a lot of conversation going on about that. We know that the regulations are just out of kilter. We know that there's minimum staff numbers. And I would say most of you aren't worried about minimum staff numbers because you're working at a higher level. So that's a good thing. But we know that regulations sometimes and surveyors sometimes get real focused. And we have a group of surveyors here at the conference, some of you may be. And so it's really great that we're starting to have a different partnership and conversation about what does this regulation really mean? Does it mean that there's supposed to be a light on this table beside the bed? Or is there an intent that says, an elder in their apartment where they live needs to have access to light. So it's a whole different conversation, and it's very, very cool. And then a lack of intentional education policy. Those of us that teach, I teach a class through the Gerontology Institute at Georgia State, and I'm always trying to find out, it's like, who are the nursing professors? Can I come tell your class about gerontology? And sometimes the professors say, what's gerontology? Is that when you tell like who all your relatives are? And I'm like, no, that's genealogy. But just let me come and I'll tell you. I can tell you too. So we're starting to go back and forth and create different types of conversation. And then we also know the immigration policy and what's going on there, and how we really are counting on individuals from all ethnic groups in different countries to support our workforce. Now this is what we wanted you to note, so we put it in red. So notice that. So there's a real lack of quality supervisors. David's going to talk about that in just a minute. There's inadequate in-service training a lot of times, even though we know more and more providers have people that are really focused on that. They make in-service meaningful for their staff. And there's a lack of career mobility many times, or staff haven't had the opportunity to be developed, to be mobilized within an organization. So what we've seen in Georgia is a lot of people just leaving organizations and going to different ones instead of like growing in their organizations. Inadequate compensation and benefits, and then not competitive in a technology point of view. And that's really true. I have to say, as a person that works in aging services, I'm behind, and I'm embarrassed about it. And at the Southern Gerontological Society, Robert Bowles and Brian LeBlanc, both individuals living with two different kinds of dementia, they were there just like they're here. So we can take advantage of talking to them and everything. And it was our responsibility to get everybody from the airport, get everybody there. And so we were sitting there having lunch the first day, just the three of us, and they were talking about the conference app, and Robert's like, oh, I downloaded my conference app right when we got here, Brian. Oh, I did mine before. And I was like, I hadn't been able to get my app to work. And Brian goes, so the ones that have dementia have their app going, but the one at the table that doesn't can't figure out how to get his app. It's like okay, touche, that's right. So, God, what lessons, right? What lessons. And so career mobility, not competitive technology. So going on. Educational things. We know that there's not enough faculty. There's, in the technical schools, for example, there's a lot of people that want to go to nursing school, and there's a lot of people that are eligible, meet the criteria, but there's only places for like 60 people because that's all the faculty they have. So it's not that we don't have people that want to get the education and expertise, but it's like we don't have the faculty. So we have to think about that. And so we need to think about how all these things work, and then think about career ladders. And what the millennials told us is that they want career lattices. Think about that. So they want to know how things work in an organization. They might not want to just climb up, but they may want to say, if they're in a big retirement community, what's that clinical stuff like? How does the dining work and how does that fit into a person's quality of life? So they're really interested in the whole lattice. And then what do we do about older workers? We're letting people retire. The statistics are huge over the amount of retirement that's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. It's really scary in our field. And so what are we doing with these people? It's like, we give them a plaque or we give them whatever for however many months they worked, and we love them, and it's like stay in touch and all that, or they get the watch, whatever it is. But we need to be saying, how do we keep you? We need your expertise. And so what if somebody says, I want to work 3 mornings a week? Well, then we got to figure out how to do that. We can't say, oh, well, our staffing schedules don't allow for that, or we don't really have a shift for that. But how do we keep that expertise in our organizations? And we're going to have to really, really think about it. The solutions are to become employers of choice. And that's how we sell ourselves. And a lot of times, even if you are, one of the things I've noticed, especially in not-for-profit organizations that I've had the most experience with, but mission-driven organizations in general, we're really focused on doing a good job. Let's do a good job, let's meet the mission, let's go on to the next thing. But we forget how many awesome things we're doing. We don't talk about it. Many times we don't celebrate it. It's just we're working hard and we're doing a good job. Well, what about good to great? How do we get to a point where we're doing a great job? And what does that look like? So how do those conversations work out in our organizations? Coming up with some kind of performance excellence thing, like the Baldrige program in our field, career ladders we talked about, and quality management and supervision, which we're going to talk about. So what we see when you start putting all those things together, you start a conversation, you start looking at stuff, there's just disconnects everywhere. And I think you're seeing that. Aren't you seeing that in your organizations? Just tons and tons of disconnects. And it could be on any of those things that we just mentioned. And the reality is, and I'm usually, in my former job, I was the one that was always known for telling the truth. So when legislators wanted to know something, or the governor's office, it's like, call us and, we're going to tell you the truth. If it's crappy, if it doesn't work, if it's the best thing, that's kind of what's happening. So I've just got to tell the truth now. Now I don't care as much because we have our own business, so I can cuss and say what I want. But before I couldn't. But what we're seeing is we're just seeing organizations crossing their fingers, hoping that it's all going to work out. It's like, really? How stupid can you be? But that's what we're doing. We're pretending like there's not an epidemic. And what are some of the ways we're doing it? We hardly have any turnover. We are an Eden property. We are into culture change. We just don't have any turnover. And so what happens? Comfortable, and then all of a sudden, boom, we are not ready. We haven't been doing anything. So when you're comfortable and things are going good, right, that's when you're supposed to be planning and positioning and getting everything ready for what's coming next. And then the other thing is that we're just simply lying about it. We know that it's not great, and we're lying about it, and our nose is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually your nose gets so heavy that you fall down, right? So there's starting to be a lot of questions about that. And so our idea is to share with you some things along the pathway that we think can help you build your organization, make staff happy, and a lot of it because you're here at this conference, but we want to remind you of it and maybe dig a little bit deeper. Okay.
All right, great. So Walter did a great job of really showing you, can you hear me all right? To show you kind of what the trends are, which leads to this, what we call the Hourglass mentoring coaching model. So we chose the Hourglass because it reminds us that we need to take the time to invest in our employees and in our staff. It's a very important thing. So the top part of that Hourglass really talks about when individuals come into our organizations, they bring with them their experiences, which leads to their beliefs about all kinds of things. You have staff who think because of their gender or because of their ethnicity, or because of their childhood trauma, that they can't do certain things, that they're limited in some way. So they bring all of this to the workplace because, it doesn't stop at the door, as you well know. We bring who we are to our jobs. And so something I often would say, because I used to be the executive director of Lutheran Towers, which is an affordable housing community in Atlanta, and I would say to the staff, particularly if there was an issue, either in their performance or something about them, I would say to them, you take yourself wherever you go. So whatever your issue is, now is a good time for you to take care of it, because you're in an environment that's created for you where you can work on those things. Because if you leave here, you're going to go to the next place and do the very same thing. You're going to have the same experience. And so that's the part where we take employees in and they're kind of raw. We take them, we meet them where they are. But then in the middle part is where we begin to sort of assess ourselves and assess them about what opportunities there are for this individual to grow themselves, to grow their skills. And that's kind of where we come in with the new work that we're doing, is really helping to develop, mainly using emotional intelligence, which I'll talk about more shortly. And then as you get to the bottom of the hourglass, that's really the opportunity to move forward armed with new skills and experiences in the workplace. Emotional intelligence is really, I would say years ago, it wasn't acceptable to talk about emotions and being aware of those kind of things in the workplace. It was more of a liability if you talked about your emotions. But now things have changed so that so many more places recognize that there's emotions in every interaction that you have with people. Emotional intelligence itself was really popularized by Daniel Goleman, who's an author and a science journalist. And in 1995, he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. And he was the one that was responsible for this model that you see today, that's one of the more popular ones. And he did a lot of research across different organizations, different job sectors and industries to come up with this model. Emotional intelligence is defined as your ability to recognize and understand emotions and your skill at using this awareness to manage yourself and your relationship with others. Overall, you can look at this as being interpersonal intelligence, but then it further breaks down to personal competence, and social competence. So personal is about you. Social competence is about other people. What we've done in our work is we've used emotional intelligence really as the foundation for all the work we do, because we recognize it and we've seen for ourselves that even if you go on and learn skills like communication skills or active listening skills, everything still comes back to emotional intelligence. And so that's why we use it more as a foundation for all of the work that we do. Key word in this is awareness. Awareness is really knowing what's going on around you. And once you realize what's going on around you, then you have the choice to change it if you want to. But it all really starts with awareness. Self-awareness, which is the first skill set, would be defined as recognizing your own emotional state and how your behavior impacts others. So it's really learning and recognizing your own tendencies, or even sometimes your own biases, so that you can make better decisions about how to move forward in a relationship with someone. The second skill is called self-management, and it's really, once you become aware of those emotions, what do you do with it? It's really looking at how you manage those emotions in a productive way. The third is social awareness, which is really recognizing and understanding the emotions in other people. And when you understand that, especially in a work environment, when you understand those emotions about other people, then it gives you a better opportunity to maybe develop deeper, lasting, and better and more productive relationships with that person when you understand where they're coming from. Relationship management really kind of brings it all together, because once you get that awareness and you're managing yourself in a more positive way, then it brings about a better relationship. So let's talk a little bit about what emotional intelligence is not. This figure of a person really has 3 circles that really show the 3 dimensions of the whole person. And it's made up of IQ, personality, and EQ, which is emotional intelligence. IQ measures your innate ability to learn. And over your life, it doesn't change very much. It changes very little, as a matter of fact, because you're measured at each in cohorts of people your same age. So over your lifetime, it really doesn't change that much. Personality is just a set of tendencies. For instance, being an introvert or being an extrovert. That also, once you become an adult, really doesn't change very much. It changes very little as well. The interesting thing about that personality piece is that you can take a person who is an introvert, and they go to a party, and they have a few drinks, and suddenly they become the life of the party. And I bet some of you have done that. Go ahead and admit it. You have. We're all guilty of that. But what happens in that case is the person's personality hasn't changed. In fact, it's just a behavior. Their behavior changed because it really was the alcohol talking. It wasn't their personality of who they are. And so both IQ and personality, as I've stated already, is they change very little. But what's different is EQ is kind of accounts for that dimension of a person that doesn't include IQ and personality. EQ is a set of skills, and because they're a set of skills, they can change. You can improve on that. And so that's the beauty of emotional intelligence, is that it can change. And you can, with practice, right education and practice, you can really, literally, as the research shows, grow new neural connections that allow you to make that become your habit. I think that's all I have for that. So emotional intelligence and job performance. There's a whole host of just evidence-based research that's done that shows a real link between emotional intelligence and job performance. It accounts for a lot of what happens. There's an organization called Talent Smart, which is an organization that both provides products and services around emotional intelligence. And so they've taken this research and applied it to the workplace. And so they have actually put together lots of graphs and data that show the relationship between your age. As you get older, most people improve naturally with their emotional intelligence, to some degree. It shows, they've done research on showing different job sectors. There are some sectors where, on average, people have higher or lower depending on the sector. And so they've done a lot of research around this. And in fact, one of the things we've discovered, Walter and I both have discovered in working with different companies, is there are more and more companies now are using emotional intelligence criteria and testing in their hiring process, because they believe that it really makes a difference if you have a workforce that's high in emotional intelligence. So that's a huge change. It shows you the seriousness that companies are taking emotional intelligence. And I'll tell you honestly, with Walter and I, we get excited about it, so I'm trying to be as calm as I can and not sound like a fundamentalist about it, but we've seen it work. And plus, we're working on our own emotional intelligence as well. In this slide, the second bullet is the one I want to call your attention to, and that's when Goldman did some research that found that it's EI, it can be EI or EQ, is twice as important as academic or technical knowledge for work success. Because, I told you it's that third element that IQ and personality don't account for. We all know people who are really smart and seem to have it together okay, but somehow they either don't relate well to people or they just can't seem to find success in their workplace or even in their lives. But they're really smart. So what's the problem? Well, it's that third thing. It's the emotional intelligence that makes the difference. So, one of the things that we realized that emotional intelligence skills are really great because you can't think of a situation, particularly in the work environment, where there's not interaction with other people. And because there's interaction with other people, it can get complicated sometimes because we have to observe, take in information, observe it, and then respond. And many times it's all at the same time. So we have people we have to talk to, either through email or telephone. I mean, so there's a lot going on. A lot of emotions are tied to that. But with higher emotional intelligence, you get to know yourself better and understand other people. And that in turn helps you to make better decisions. And people who make better decisions then can really see opportunities and seize on those opportunities, particularly in the workforce, in the workplace. And they can identify any problems that exist, particularly in interpersonal situations, so that when you get to that difficult conversation, which inevitably happens even in the best of organizations, at least you're better equipped with the tools and the skills to minimize the level of disruption. So we're going to just pause for a moment, and I'm going to ask you all, just around your tables, if you'll just share with the people at your table how you think emotional intelligence skills relate to the Eden principles. And then if you want to find them, if you look on the back of your program, there should be a list of principles there. So just at your table, just discuss how you think emotional intelligence skills relate to the Eden principles. Let's take a few minutes. Okay, all right, we have one here.
Okay, wait.
Okay, he's going to bring
have
the
to talk in the
microphone because they're
microphone.
recording this. So.
Oh, thank you. So we talked about that being able to be in the minute because your emotional intelligence allows you to sense where somebody is, particularly with dementia care.
Right.
That's the antidote for boredom. That's number 5.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. That's great. Anybody else? You have a look on your face like you you got to talk.
And we decided it was going to let our leader do it, the CEO.
Oh, okay.
Did you just get thrown under the bus?
These ladies are from Sparta, Georgia. They serve 81 elders in Sparta, and this is their introduction to Eden. So I just think it's awesome that they're open, that they're hungry, that they want to know how to improve the quality of care. I think that the combination of emotional intelligence and Eden is embodied in these 3 new friends that we have here.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome.
Okay. So ask for a raise when you get home.
And what you displayed right there is you got to know them deeply. Mm-hmm. You got to know them deeply to be able to tell their story. That's awesome. It's great. Let's get one more table.
Okay, right here. Okay, here you go.
I forgot what I'm going to say. All right. So I think for me, it's looking at the 3 plagues, the loneliness, helplessness, and boredom. So in order for us to hire the right care partner to fit into our culture, because all of us here are implementing Eden in our communities, right? So they have to have, because when I look at your previous slide, it says, what's that? It says right decision making as well as managing difficult situations. So each care partner must be able to decide right away that the decision contact point wherein they would apply the right antidote for that plague, which is loneliness plagues.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's
Yay.
great. So you get it. You guys get it. That's great. So another component to the pathway to retaining staff is supervision. We all know this, that workers don't leave their jobs. They leave who? Their supervisors. Absolutely. Another emerging trend that we're seeing now is that folks are leaving their jobs for better pay and better benefits.
Yeah, they are.
So let's talk about the different types of supervision. You know, talent retention is a vital issue in our whole field. And things have changed or changing because of demand, that it's the move away from the more autocratic hierarchies, command and control type form of supervision. That's going by the wayside. You know, good people want to have more choice. They want to enjoy their lives more. They want more responsibility. And this traditional model doesn't really give them that. There's polarities in the traditional model that ranges from being dictatorial to almost abdicating. If you think about it, when we were little, when we were children, our parents told us what to do. Then we went to school, our teachers told us what to do. We went to college, our professors and administrators would tell us what to do. Then we get our first job and we get into the workplace, and guess what? Our supervisors and bosses tell us what to do. Then we, if we're lucky enough, become supervisors and bosses one day, and guess what we do to our staff? We tell them what to do, because that's what we've learned. We've learned it from all our lives, and from leaders around us have taught us you tell people what to do. Well, that's more like dictating, and that's when the boss tells you exactly what to do. But if you look at that spectrum, going from the autocratic to the more just get out of my face, go away, the next point on that is persuading. You have a boss who will come to you with their incredibly great idea. They know it's a great idea, or they think it is anyway. And so they come to us with this great idea and try to persuade us to adopt their idea. Well, we know enough just to smile and not ask a lot of questions. And so the boss pretty much ends up getting his way. It may feel to him like he's being more democratic about it, but he really isn't, because you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice in the a say in the matter. So that really doesn't work for us. And then you get a boss who wants to come and discuss. Now, that's a little bit better, because it seems like maybe they're at least willing to try something different. That's maybe not necessarily their idea, but they're willing to try something different. You know, the problem with that approach is it can be very slow, and it just doesn't work as well. I mean, it can also lead to indecision. There's another thing that happens with that approach. And then there's the approach of abdicating. And that's when the boss says, you know what, you all go ahead and take care of this issue, you handle it, you go take care of it. It's great for the boss, because the boss can then take care of some other issues. The problem is that's risky, because you're abdicating. You're just giving it to a staff person or a group of staff people to do whatever needs to be done, but they don't have a lot of direction. And we all know what happens if something goes wrong. Guess who gets blamed for it? We do, not the boss. So the boss just abdicates, kind of laissez-faire, as they say. You know, we hope it works out. Well, that really doesn't work out. So in this slide, this is showing the traditional way that supervisors address issues. So they bring you into their office usually, they sit you down, they explain clearly what the problem is, what the issue is, they lay out the rules that you broke, they tell you at that point, you know, if you do this is what I want you to do. First of all, they mandate to you what it is they want you to do. Then they tell you the consequences. If you do this again, then we will do. That's the traditional way of handling a situation. It's, again, I use the phrase command and control. That's a good example of command and control. But let's contrast that with the coaching supervisor, what they do. We realize, and we know, and we recognize from the research that to be successful in the future, a leader is going to have to adopt a more coaching style of doing things. The difference here is there's an issue. You bring the employee in to discuss what the issue is. Again, you want to clearly state what the problem is, but the difference is the attitude is one of creating a relationship. And so to create that relationship, you have to talk to each other. And so the manager, supervisor, boss reaches out to understand the employee's perspective of the issue. And so there's a dialogue, there's a discussion around what the issue is. And together, they work out a way to solve the problem. And the great thing about that is that the employee is a part of the solution. And when that employee feels like they've been a part of the solution, they're more apt to stay committed to whatever decision the two of them came together. Doesn't that sound like an easier way to operate? Because you really get buy-in and there's choice. The staff person has choice. Often when a staff person then takes on the responsibility, no matter what, they're going to make sure it gets done and it gets done right because their name is on it. And so there's ownership and there's responsibility. So that's the main difference between those two. And lastly, I'll say something about the coaching supervisor style. It's really more person-centered, isn't it? So it goes hand in hand with Eden. So one of the things we also often notice too is that individuals, good people, hardworking people, smart people, are promoted into supervisory positions, but then they don't get any training to go with that. And so they're set up to fail. Walter and I have done a few workshops for coaching supervisors. It's called coaching supervision, teaching the coaching style of supervision. And the interesting thing is the last workshop we did, there were 20 participants in that class. Only 2 had ever previously received any kind of training on supervision. 2 out of 20. And unfortunately, that's not unusual. We're seeing that a lot. So we're bringing folks to higher positions, we're paying them more, but we're not giving them the support or the education they need to do their jobs. And I think we all have experienced that. One of the things I'm doing currently is working with 4 managers from a home health organization. And it's just awesome to see that these are 4 very different people. And again, like that hourglass that I showed you, they came into their organization with their own experience, with their own beliefs. But it's fascinating to watch how they have taken the emotional intelligence skills and applied them to not only to their own staff, but to their whole organization and all of the care partners on the team. And it's fascinating to see it in action. The other thing is watching them build their own self-belief in themselves, because that's another important component, is having that self-belief. I'm going to read a passage to you that kind of talks about what I've been saying all along. It's from a book called Coaching for Performance, and it's written by Sir John Whitmore. It's a great book. But the passage is this. It's called A Coaching Mindset. To coach successfully, you have to adopt a far more optimistic view than the usual of the dormant capability of all people. A coaching mindset is what it's called. Pretending you are optimistic is insufficient because you convey your genuine beliefs in many subtle ways. Building others' self-belief demands that you change the way you think about them, and in doing so, release the desire to control them or to maintain their belief in your superior abilities, and thus makes them dependent. And see, we all know with our elders, we don't want to make them dependent on us because it makes them what? Helpless. And so, why would we want to make our staff helpless as well by making them dependent on us? So that speaks directly to that Eden principle. One of the best things you can do for them is to assist them in not being dependent on you. After all, children's most memorable and exciting moments are often the first occasions on which they beat a parent at a game of skill. That is why in the early days, parents sometimes allow them to win. They want their children to overtake them, and they are proud when they do. Would that leaders could be so proud when their team members do the same? You can only gain through your team's greater performance and through the satisfaction of watching them and helping them grow. However, all too often, you may be afraid of losing your job, your authority, your credibility, or your own self-belief. That's awesome. So we're going to try something else. Just to kind of anchor the whole thought of a coaching mindset, individually, this is what I'd like for you to do, is to think of someone you work with regularly and apply each of the following mindsets. So stay with each mindset for as long as you can before moving to the next, noticing what responses each evokes in you. So the 3 mindsets that you see here are, and you're thinking about this person, take a moment, think about them as, I think this person is a problem. Then secondly, think of the person another way. I think this person has a problem. And then third, I think this person is on a learning journey and is capable, resourceful, and full of potential. So you get it? So individually, just visualize somebody you know, somebody you work with, and apply that mindset to that person, each one of those. And just take a few minutes to do that. Okay? Okay. So I hear a little bit of talking, so I know you had enough time. I'm just going to ask just a few questions that are listed in this book, just to get us thinking. So what did you notice about the different mindsets? 3 different mindsets. What did you notice about them? If Vanna will please take the microphone around. Thank you, Vanna.
I knew that. I was just testing you.
The way that thinking of that person in each of the categories makes you feel or makes you think of that person.
Exactly, exactly. So what different feelings or emotions do they create in you? You want to follow up with that? What did it create in you when you thought of the person as being a problem?
So the first one is that the problem lies within the person. And so that was a negative feeling. Whereas the second one was more of a understanding type feeling.
Yeah.
And the third one was actually a positive feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in thinking of that person's potential, how do you think it affects, these 3 affect your thought about what their potential is? It goes along with what you just said. So you just answered it. So ask yourself, what mindset do you tend to adopt with people? Which one of these 3 do you tend to adopt? The person, the day. That is so true. That is so true. So, I mean, this is something to think about. You know, what you think about someone and how you perceive them is going to affect the way you interact with them. All right. So we contend that a person-centered organization is more likely to retain staff for all of them and many more reasons that I've already outlined. By eliminating the hierarchy, the staff member then is free to interact and engage with the elder in a much better and deeper and long-lasting and beneficial way. I think with increased staff satisfaction, you can expect also that goes along with that is less turnover. And we know how expensive turnover is. I like this slide about transformation. Moving through the transition takes the presence and support of wise senior management. So much of what we do, that's principle number 10, is why the need for wise senior management is indispensable. When I think of transformation, I first think of change, but the difference between change and transformation is with change, you can change your hairdo, you can change your clothes, you can change your spouse. That resonates. It changes, it's temporary and many times. It's a temporary thing, whereas transformation is more of a permanent thing. And I think of the butterfly, I think of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Once it becomes a butterfly, it can never, ever go back to being a caterpillar again. Doesn't matter if they don't like how big they are, they don't like what color they are, they may even be afraid of heights. It doesn't matter at that point. They're a butterfly and they're going to remain a butterfly. Well, that's the kind of transformation that we want to see in organizations. I don't know what happened to my slide there. But the three areas of transformation are personal, operational, and physical. Everything always goes back first to the personal, because we as individuals have to change our way of thinking and make a transformation in ourselves. Once we make that transformation and know better, we do better, then that's going to affect the way we operate our communities. New ideas, new values, all of that would be incorporated in our daily lives and our work environments. And then thirdly, we often think, well, we really want our building to reflect these new values. And so thirdly, that's why we put physical as being the third. Care partnerships, very important, because it's part of the process of eliminating loneliness, helplessness, and boredom. And this is what a care partner team looks like. It's anybody that touches the elder. Anybody that touches the elder. So it could be family members, friends, neighbors, volunteers, medical team, or home health professionals. And then finally, I want to say that the silos. The great thing about care partnership, it helps to break down those silos. Those silos may be departments. It could be care partners outside of your community. And we also see when that begins to happen, when those walls begin to fall, that staff satisfaction goes up and staff turnover reduces. So this is a strong case for being person-centered and using emotional intelligence skills. Okay?
So continuing on with this thinking, the idea that we want to make sure that the decision making is as close to the elder as possible. We all know that. The things we're talking about are things that we know. But what we're trying to do is start beginning to make a case for person-centered organization, supervision, all these pieces that come into play with making sure that all care partners are happy, feel successful, and are engaged in community. So making sure that decisions are close to the elder. And the neighborhood work teams, which we're going to talk about if you're lucky enough to remember to go to the Empowering Teams deep dive tomorrow. That's in room Paces, East and West. I'm just giving an advertisement for some of the people that are going to be teaching it here. And so the work teams are so important. So when people are happy in their teams, it's not only about supervisors, but it's about care partnership all the way around. So in neighborhood work teams, decisions are made as a team, nobody's left hanging, and their empowerment is the moving of the authority, the accountability, the resources, and the information out of the departmental hierarchy, where David was talking about the silos, into the team. And for empowerment to exist, then all four of these elements have to exist. And of course, we want all the teams to make decisions on ethical principles which they develop. So now ARIA, this is the way to remember this. And again, in case you don't get to go to that, this is something you'll want to know. The authority, resources, information, and accountability, the ARIA. And so we all know that an aria is operatic song. So when you think about it from the music point of view, you have somebody has to write the song, the orchestra has to play it, somebody has to sing it. It takes all those pieces to make an aria a beautiful experience. So the same goes for work teams. All this has to happen for people to be empowered. And so start thinking about how staff are satisfied, how staff and employees, they start thinking differently when they have the resources that they need. And that's all those things that are listed up there. They have the time, they have the space, they have the skills. And isn't it, it's really cool to think about, let's invest our money this way instead of in replacing staff and all those things that cost a lot of money. The information, before somebody's empowered, do they know all the parameters, the guidelines, the regulations, all those things that they have to know? And how do they have access to the other things they need? So that's just kind of an advertisement for that. When we talk about empowerment, we've noticed that there's a lot of confusion between delegating and empowering, because people say, well, I delegate this and I delegate that. But it's where really some authority is given for a specific action on somebody's behalf. So you're really assigning somebody to carry out a task, where empowerment takes it to a different level. So the person that is empowered has the opportunity to act on their own because they've been given the information that they need. And what's so good is, just like on the slide that we put up there, is that the more authority that's given, then it's the opportunity to develop an employee's commitment, their enthusiasm, develop their expertise, and encourage innovation about things that will help the organization for over a long period of time. So delegation keeps you in the center of the leadership activity, so you still don't get away from that, where empowerment places someone else at the center of the leadership activity. And the decision ring thing, that if you've ever read a lot of information about the Eden approach, and we talk about the decision ring, how do we make those decisions with the elder in the middle, and the care partners that are touching the lives of the people, that actually touch them. What the conversation has really gotten to, that I think that maybe a lot of people didn't think about, is that when people are empowered, and you actually go through an empowerment model, I'm getting ready to show you the pieces of it, but when you go through that and people are empowered, then they're making decisions with the elder. The elder is making decisions with the support of those closest to them. Well, then what happens is the next ring outside the decision ring, which may be supervisors, department heads, all that, instead of them getting sucked into decisions when they may not know the person as well, they might not know the situation, then all of a sudden they're getting freed up to do what they think they were hired to do. And we've had some really interesting conversations over the last year with people that are department heads and supervisors, and they're starting to empower people. They're looking at the model. And let's just see if, I don't know what happened here, but the information, knowledge, resources, environment, all those things that have to happen for somebody to be empowered, once those happen, then a person can start making those decisions without, the supervisor there. So speaking of power is our goal, and this is in the Eden Associate Certification. In case any of you have been there, you can remember this, but we pulled this out because there's different kinds of power, and we've noticed in some organizations, there's a lot of talk about who has the power. I thought it was kind of an old thing where people are like, I've got the power in the situation and stuff, and it's kind of seems like to me an old way of thinking, but we're hearing people still talk about like who in the room has the power and all that stuff. So we thought we would put in this slide because the three different kinds of power that are laid out, condign power is where there's negative consequences. So if you go fast, you're going to get a ticket. If the state comes in and you aren't taking care of somebody, the survey, you're going to get dinged on it. Compensatory power is where, you compensate somebody. So, you cut my grass, I give you $20. You wash my car, I pay you. And conditioned power is where people are educated and persuaded and given information they need about why we want to do things, why and how and why it's right, why it meets our mission. And so conditioned power is the goal for trying to work from that. Now, sometimes there's a need for those other kinds of power, but we just thought, well, since we were talking about empowerment, that we wanted to throw that in the mix. So now we start getting to the point where we're thinking about, what do we do? Are we really going to change? We talk about the culture change movement, but are we changing the culture of what we're doing to support staff in order to retain them and in order to just work more successfully? All the principles, the eating principles, start unfolding and blooming for us when we do the right things. So when you start trying to make the change, you have to think about all these things. Number one, you have to look at yourself and really evaluate yourself and see what you're doing. It was so cool because we had a big retirement community in Georgia, and the CEO called and said, you know, I've got a really great leadership team. They function at a really high level. Things are going great, but it just seems like there's not a lot of energy, and I don't know what's happening. We're at the end of a strategic plan. We're getting ready to launch into another one. So can you guys, you know, help create some conversations? So David actually went and had one-on-one conversations with everybody in the leadership team. But what the CEO said before we got there, he said, I'm afraid I haven't given the team all the resources that they need. I'm afraid I'm doing something wrong. And I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to grow as well. And we were just like, wow, because usually it's like, you know, can you come help me? Okay. And then like, here they are, I'm going to be in here. And so, but he was at the table. And even in all the interviews that went through about getting to know a person first, and so David spent the time of getting to know people individually, and then trying to find out about their organization and what they thought about moving things forward. Well, the executive director, as a member of the leadership team, went through the same interviews. And so, wow, isn't that cool? And we heard Jill this morning saying when she first went to the nursing home, she said, you know, check me in and let me see what's happened. Admit me, put me in here and let me see. And she said, you know, even after the first day, she was like, this isn't going real well. So all those things start happening. And then how do we look at our own well-being and all these pieces? Now I just have to throw this in, and it seems to come out in everything we do, and I don't know why, except I just like it. But it's so interesting when you start talking about doing things differently, and you know in your organizations you see people that are like, I'm on board, whatever, just tell me what to do, it's great, I love it. I love you, I love it all. And then you have the people, it isn't gonna work, we never did it, we tried it before, it's not gonna work. But those folks are sometimes outliers. And then what we see, you know, there's some people that, you know, they do a good job, they're there, 9-to-5ers get their paycheck. They're just kind of like, if that's what we're doing, I'm good. But then most of the times there's like some resistance going on. When we start talking about doing things differently, we get into that resistant piece. And what we've discovered is that oftentimes it's because people are anxious about it. We know when people are anxious that it leads to fear. And what is the antidote to fear? Eden Associates? Education, yay, gold star. So the antidote to fear is education. And what's so interesting is that most of the time when people are afraid, they're resisting, you're talking about something different, all of a sudden it's because they don't know. And most of the time there's two things that are the unknowns. It's that, you know, what will it be like? What's it going to be like? And can I do it? Will I be successful? It's really interesting. There's some nursing homes in Georgia that we've worked with over the last year. And they have several nursing homes. And the first one was going to do the Eden journey. And they were all excited. They want to get on the registry. They started going to the professional development opportunities and all that. And so we were asked to do the associate training with the management team, just so everybody could get on the same page, have the same language, start thinking about things differently. And this was a staff that had worked together 10, 12, 14 years. I mean, they were hysterical. They knew everything about each other, cutting, you know, just carrying on horribly. And then we get in here and all of a sudden they're just like this. And the whole first day, it was like tight. And so we were like using our good emotional intelligence, you know, we're like, something ain't right in this room. It's feeling really weird. And so the second day, we started a conversation again. And what we found out was that they were afraid that they weren't going to be successful. They're like, we're the first ones. What if we don't do it right? What if we fail? What if we can't support elders and make all these definitions and stuff come alive? And we had an incredible conversation, and that's where we got to share about the journey. We know all this is a journey. It's not a program where we do 1, 2, 3, check it off, get our certificate, and go home, right? We know it's an ongoing journey. Well, so is what are we going to do to retain our staff? How are we going to keep people together? So once they realized that it was their own journey, we were like, well, the nursing home on the other part of town or in another town that's a part of your organization, they may be doing this later, but their journey is going to be different. You know, they're in a different place. They have different, all the care partners are different. They have different backgrounds. Now, there may be some stuff that you can share and steal from each other, but still, it's going to be, there may be difference. So this is just free information. So when you start talking about doing things differently, you know, realize that there's going to be a group that where there's going to be resistance. Understand immediately it's about being anxious and afraid, and the fear is because of a lack of education and the unknown pieces. And the unknowns are so many of the time, can I do it? Can I handle it? Can I really do it? Or what is it going to be like? And so you have to kind of create a vision for what are we going to do. So just think about coaching. What if you went back and you just said to your organization, we're gonna become a coaching organization. We're gonna implement, part of being person-centered organization is we're gonna coach people. We're gonna have a different relationship. All that stuff David was telling you about. And so you get to know people. And in everyday conversations, you're solving problems. So you don't ever have to have those big come into the office ones where it's really scary. I mean, those are minimized because you're having daily conversations when you know folks. How would that change everything? So we get back down, we're coming full circle to the whole idea of the 10th principle is wise leadership. We just have to have it. And what we were told is that that was a 10th principle that was added, but it's also the first place that you need to start. So you have to start with wise leadership. And what's really interesting about this is that it's kind of a two gloves. There's one where many times we think that leaders are senior managers. We get confused. So we say, you're the leader of the organization, and we mean you're the senior manager or senior management. But what we know that there's senior managers that aren't great leaders, and we know that there's leaders that aren't senior managers, right? So then the conversation moves to where what we want to do is make sure that there's leaders throughout the organization, people that are empowered to make decisions, that can give you information and interact great. So leaders, the ability to influence another to create positive change. So what I'd like for you to do is think about this, just a few minutes of reflection. And this is something that you've done before. You may have not done all the parts of this before, but just find something to write on and make a quick list of 6 to 8 things that are characteristics of a leader who's influenced you. So think of somebody that's influenced you that you would follow, that's been a leader in your life, and write down 6 or 8 characteristics of that leader. Let's take a minute to do that. Okay, now look at the list that you have, and I want you to think of a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best, and 1 being the most opportunity for improvement. Notice I didn't say worst. Most opportunity for improvement is 1 to 10. And I'd like for you to look at those characteristics again and rate yourself on those characteristics. From 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. So whatever those characteristics are, just put a number between 1 and 10 to, it's kind of a self-evaluation. Just rate yourself. Okay, now look at the top ones, maybe 8 to 10, 7 to 10, however they're kind of grouped. Maybe you have a couple. Just notice those, maybe circle those. Strengths that you have that are lined up with characteristics of leaders in your life. And then be aware of the ones where there's opportunities of improvement. So this is so important when we talk about leadership, and we have to look at ourselves. We talk about in this whole movement that we have to have the personal experience first. We have to believe deep in our hearts that an older adult has a human right for a great quality of life. I mean, we have to start there. And so the whole personal thing is so important. So if it is, when we're talking about being a person-centered leader in a person-centered organization and being able to create opportunities for all care partners to succeed, that's a big prescription. I mean, that's a lot to think about. There's a lot of elements tied to that. So share one of your strengths. A lot of times, we just don't say what we do well. We're embarrassed or we play small, but share around your table at least one thing that's in your strong category and be proud of it, okay? Take just a minute to do that. Okay, what we'd like to encourage you to do is be aware of your strengths, and it's okay to share them. There's a whole thing about strength-based leadership. And sometimes you focus on developing your strengths and focusing on making your strengths stronger. And most of the research says that if there's a weakness or something that needs to be improved, that it'll go along with it. So thank you for doing that. And this is a really good exercise too. If you think you want to do something else, say you want to be the executive director of a retirement community. And so if you just take that, it's like, what are the qualities and skills that an executive director of a retirement community need to have? Think real hard, get a list, and then rate yourself. And all of a sudden you're going to see, wow, I can do that, I know how to do that, but here's some things that I need to think about. So it'll work for you together as well. So all leaders are becoming change agents. We know that leaders create other leaders. John Maxwell says that only 10% of people are natural-born leaders, 5% of people become successful leaders in a crisis, and 85% of folks become leaders because of other leaders. So we have to think about, what are we doing? What are we modeling? If you want to include elders in everything, then you have to model including elders in everything, right? If you want to talk about care partnership, you have to do that all the time. So, and we know that we have to remember the Eden golden rule: what management does unto staff, staff do unto the elders. And we've seen that so many times. One of the things in the coaching supervision course that we teach, that David was telling you about, it used to be a 2-day thing, so there was homework, and when they came back, they were supposed to practice some of these different exercises, and they would come back, and we would have like single mothers saying, I just had a conversation with my teenage daughter that I haven't had in 3 years, because they were starting to just use some of these simple communication ideas. And then after this workshop, then people were telling us that when they started using coaching, that they noticed that the people that were being coached were using those same skills with the people that they were serving. So it was becoming a more interactive environment. So wise leadership, and it's got to come full circle. It's what puts all the pieces together of this whole thing. And if there's not wise leadership, there can't be happy, successful care partnership. Doesn't that make sense? And so it all starts fitting together. It's a nicely fitted together puzzle. And this is just in the same guy in the Performance Consultants International, is the emerging workforce is demanding that organizations adopt a more coaching-centered leadership. And it really means more person-centered. We have to be more person-centered. It's an international conversation. And they said everything that gets in the way is like, there's not enough time. We have too many things going on that are driving it. We're focused on, what our product is or everything. And the need for employee development always kind of comes up last. So how do we move that, and how do we change that conversation? So really, this is one of my favorite slides. And it's in every presentation, no matter what the presentation is. But for today, it's going to be, how are you going to show up? How are you going to show up? We have to change. Even if we say we have a low turnover rate, we're person-centered, we started the Eden Registry, whatever that is, how are we doing this? What is it looking like in our organizations? And we have to realize that there's a crisis, a workforce crisis going on. There's going to be a lack of people to work in our aging services. So what are we doing to be the valued, how are we creating value in our field? So what we told you is simply that we have to invest in people. It's just so, it seems so simple to us because we've been trying to look at this from a different point of view and get outside the provider piece and get outside the regulatory piece. So we have to invest in individuals. And who is an individual? Every care partner, right? Remember, the elder is not separate from the care partnership. Everybody is a part of that. But employees, staff, people that are touching the lives of elders, people that are running the departments, people that are senior managers, all have to be a part of this. So just to recap, emotional intelligence, like David said, every time it connects back to emotional intelligence. It doesn't matter what conversation we get into, what kind of crisis, what kind of great thing is going on, the conversation always goes back to those emotional intelligence skills. And we see over and over that that's what's missing in people. And sometimes it can be what's missing in us. You know, we're trying to move forward this whole movement to do the right things. We are leaders in our organization in some way. And so, you know, what are we doing to develop those skills? We may be pretty smart, we may have an okay personality, but it's that other piece, and that's the part that are skills that can be changed and developed. So if we're going to be a part of a person-centered organization, we have to start thinking about how to make decisions. And what we see and what we read and what we hear is that organizations that are person-centered, decision-making is getting to the elders, elder-driven, with decisions right there and those closest to them. The staff are happier. They're doing what they want to do. They have a relationship. They're empowered. They've gone through the model. They've done the ARIA, right? And they have the resources. They have everything they need, and they're making decisions. And then it only makes sense that the organization is doing well, because at the next layer up, the next ring, are the department heads, the folks that are doing different types of supervision, and then all of a sudden they have the opportunity to really do their job. And they have time to be proactive. What are the industry trends? We talked about technology. They can figure out how can we add technology to what's going on. Care partnership, empowerment, empowered teams. So all these are the things that help you invest in individuals. Now, this may not be what you thought you were going to come to, and I don't know. We thought that, you know, sometimes when you go to things like this, you know, you flip chart around the room and you do different things. What we decided to do today was really to kind of give you an overview and then just start seeing the pieces of the puzzle that we think are missing. So we have to be intentional about what we're doing. And I love this. Both of these are John Maxwell things. But life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% to how you react. And so the pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. But the leader just adjusts the sails. And so you're already up here. You know, you're on your person-centered journey. You know about Eden. You're bringing new people to learn about Eden. You're participating in the curriculum that's available. You're building relationships with people globally, literally, at this conference. And so all we need to do is just keep adjusting ourselves. But as far as staff retention and investing in individuals, we have to really make sure that it stays in the forefront. So simply, you know, the ball is in our hands. What are we going to do? Are we going to wait for a crisis? Are we going to ride on the idea that we know how to do this, that we're person-centered already, that we had the workshop? Or, you know, are we going to really be progressive and look at those things? So what we want to do in closing is see if this makes sense to you. If some of these things, do you see that they could be missing links, maybe missing pieces of the puzzle, or maybe you have the piece of the puzzle but it's not quite connected? And what do you think that you could do in your organization? How do you think that some of the things that we've talked about can help you in your organization? Is there anybody that's been sitting there thinking about all these things where maybe you've connected a dot or two that you could share with your colleagues? Anything that you've seen where you think that you can do better at retaining your staff?
The delegation
Okay. Wait, will you talk in here so everybody can hear?
I'm Vanna now.
Okay.
New Vanna.
I delegate everything, so I need to learn how to empower my staff instead of telling them what to do.
Yeah.
So,
And what's so great about the empowerment thing is that they've gone through everything, and what we want and what Eden teaches us to do is if something goes wrong, you don't throw it out because you're transforming, right? You can't go back to the caterpillar. And so what you do is just go back and revisit those things. Is it not enough resources? Did a person need to practice their skills? Whatever it is. And so empowerment is put things into place so people can be successful. Thank you.
Come in.
I'm coming for advice. We have tried to empower people, and we have great relationships between our care partners and our residents. We have a lot of love in our house, but our care partners don't get along and they leave. Seems that they feel burdened because we've empowered them to make that, not the relationship part, but create engagement opportunities with our residents and to plan what to do or take advantage of the spontaneity of the day to do things. Then our care partners feel that the other care partners are not doing their part or they don't do it well enough, and on and on and on. So I came to this session to glean advice for how to deal with this issue.
Great. Well, what I'd like to do is invite you to the deep dive tomorrow, Empowering Teams, and it's using the Neighborhood Guide modules. And what we've done is picked out several modules, and Sally, that got the big award this morning from Australia, that's all excited, she's going to be there, and Denise Hyde, who is the queen of it, the Eden staff, is going to be there. And David and I are just there because we're diving into this curriculum. But what it does, it literally breaks down everything in order to tell you how to make that happen. It's pretty incredible. I meant to say, I know we have Eden educators in here and Eden staff too, so please jump in with anything you'd like to say. But please think about coming to that. Anything, any Eden staff or educators would like to respond?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Our organization uses the Eden Guide modules, and they're phenomenal. So if anybody's thinking about that, that's a great opportunity to show up and listen to that. The only other thought I had was learning circles. You're probably using them. Good.
Yeah. Anybody? I see David's running somewhere.
Okay, I saw somebody over here.
Okay.
To the point of the lady over there, we incorporated daily huddles, which you need buy-in from everybody, and to get that, you need to have leadership's involvement, but over time and persistence, leadership step back and frontline team members take them on. And we found that in the neighborhoods that were successful with regular daily huddles, shift huddles, multidisciplinary, not just nursing, then tensions decreased. They were able to solve problems before they became problems. So I think that's really helpful and part of the neighborhood team developments. But what I was interested in and wondering what other people's experiences is, you talked about millenniums wanting a career lattice rather than a ladder, and then retention of people that are looking at end of career and wanting to retire, and then how that falls in line or doesn't with the unions and awarding lines that come up, and so it's certainly interesting, but the career path wobble or whatever sometimes is hindered by some of the legislation and or unions and things like that. Just wonder what other people's experiences is.
Right. Depending on where you are in the world and even in different states, you have to look and see how that works. But I can just tell you in the United States that there's a discussion about younger workers and older workers and how do we make sure both are engaged, because we're going to have them. So I guess stay tuned. Are you? Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say the one word that stick out in my mind is when David said it's not a dictatorship. And I think we have to remember that. That's the old way of doing things.
Yeah.
And we have to continue to empower people to get them to where they need to be. But when you're trying to dictate and tell somebody what to do, and it's never going to work.
Right.
So I appreciate what you all have shared with us on today.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's great.
And we all know that there's kind of dictators that they're nice, sweet, and they smile, but they're still telling you what to do, right? So that, Denise, David, will you just say, bring us some knowledge?
Oh, yeah. I loved your comment, and thank you for sharing your story, because I think that happens in the beginning stages of empowerment. And you guys can tell me, it's very wobbly, isn't it? People are like, well, I don't know what this means. The fear of the unknown, go back to, and am I really ready to take this on? Those are two questions that people are asking. So the whole route to empowerment is to make sure before you say, we want you to also participate in helping the elders fill their life with meaning. We want you to be engaged in finding meaningful ways to do things. It sounds like it's kind of like you're passing some activity, you're sharing activity roles across. You want to make sure that they know how to do that. They may not even have any clue how to do leisure in their life because they're holding down 3 jobs and raising 2 kids on their own. Right. So you want to make sure that they've been given the skills. So one of the things we'll talk about tomorrow is that everyone is a part of the team. Because one of the things we do is we go, well, the CNAs are a team, and then everybody else is still in hierarchy and supervisory roles. No, the idea is that everybody's a part of the team. So all your activity professionals are a part of the team, and their job is to teach everybody what they know. They are the subject matter experts on activity and filling life with meaning, and their job is to grow everybody on their team. The social workers are there to grow everybody in social work skills. The administrator is there to grow them as much as they can outside of what is professionally licensed. The same with the nurses. They're there to teach them everything they know outside of what is professionally licensed. And so then everybody is a part of it. So it isn't like the administrator's not planning events, because he's on a team, he's planning events too. The director of nursing is on a team and planning events too. And they're bringing their life's passions. So Chris, who stood up over here, they're all about life passions at his community. And they invite everybody to bring their life passion and share it with the elders, and invite the elders to share their life passions with everybody. Now it becomes a reciprocal thing, and nobody's being dumped on because everybody's doing what they love. Get it? So it's about changing the paradigm and reframing it and thinking about it differently. The other word I would give you is conflict resolution skills. Everybody needs to have them.
Absolutely.
That's an emotional intelligence piece, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. So take advantage of the Eden staff, because a lot of them developed the curriculum that we're using, and they know it backwards and forwards. They understand how it fits together. They're very passionate about it. And people that have participated in the different curriculum too. There's Eden educators that have learned to facilitate different things, and so we're all trying to learn and grow together. Sometimes we do things better than others, but we're still really look to, especially the Eden staff are such great mentors for us. Anybody else? Any closing thought? We'll still get out early, yay. If you're driving in Atlanta, you'll really appreciate it. Okay, well, if you want to hang around and talk to each other, feel free. If you need to run out the door screaming because of traffic, do that. But thank you so much for coming to this, and we hope that you'll get something out of it. So thank you.